I am in despair over the immigration situation. I should clarify that yes, I was an immigrant, but I went through proper channels. It cost a fair bit of money to get permanent leave to remain, and a lot of bother. And like all other immigrants who went through proper channels, I was resentful of all these people coming in for, illegally, or through family association or whatever, not having to demonstrate that they would not be dependent on the state. Uh, I I like I like this is awkward, but I like British culture, which is not completely diluted
Mm,
by other countries, which all have their merits. But at a certain point, you have you have just become this patchwork nothing of lots of people who have very little in common, and nobody can say what it is to be British anymore. What British culture is,
mm-hmm.
and I find that very painful because I I come from a country that derives itself centrally
Yeah.
from Britain, and I have always been impressed by the cultural heritage of the UK, and it's which leads us to another objection. It's been super depressing to watch the UK bite off its all this woke, there's that word, nonsense from the US. And the UK is at least as bad as the US now,
Mm,
in terms of being obsessed with diversity and being linguistically oppressive, and and furthermore, there's no First Amendment in the UK, and that the sense was some years ago, and it keeps getting worse, that there is no freedom of speech. I mean,
mm.
this whole business of having policemen knocking on Alison Pearson's door and insisting, that she explained herself in her tweet, because somebody has objected to it. I mean, that's happening all over the country,
Yeah.
in the hundreds of thousands of you know police basically denying you the right to say what you want, and and there is no constitutional resort in the UK, so it's always been just we have freedom of speech by consensus, and now you don't. Right
Yeah.
now, the consensus is there is no freedom of speech, and
Yeah.
like most Americans, I find that horrifying.
I think the fact that Russia arrests way less people for thought crime than the UK by the magnitude of, I think, 10. So I think in Russia there was something like 360 arrests. I can't remember whether the statistic is from early 2020s or whether it's from 2018. I've got those two dates in my mind. Yet in the UK, in the same year, there was something like 3,600, I think, or it was something like 10x, which is insane to think that the thought crime is policed in the UK, but not in Russia. That just sort of gives you an idea of where we are with regards to free speech. And I think, like you said, there was an assumption within the society, almost like a social contract, that it is there. But as the sort of politicians are sort of just leaning more and more left and stop enforcing that social contract, it just disappears into nothingness, which, I mean, I don't believe that there is free speech in the UK now. And I share your lamentation even as an immigrant. And I think it's interesting because I have had some comments on YouTube because I do discuss immigration. I share your concerns on many of these levels, and it might sound terrible, but part of the reason why I came to the UK is because I admired their culture, and that culture is being destroyed at the speed that I still can't comprehend. I've been living in the UK for 19 years, coming up to 19 years, and the changes that I've seen in the 19 years have been radical. So for people that actually grew up over here, it must be the changes must be completely just insane. And I do feel a little bit weird about it because I'm here sort of criticizing the immigration, yet I am one of these people that came to the country and benefited from it. But I somehow can hold these two thoughts together that even when I was coming to the UK, which was 2006, there was already a margin of the population that felt that the immigration was too high. I think the amount of people that now believe that is a huge majority. But I still sort of benefited from it. Yet I can still say that immigration largely, especially the sort of what we've seen in the last 10 years, 15 years, hasn't been for the benefit of the UK at all. I see that almost like a Marxist wealth and fortune distribution on like global scale.
Well, to be practical, all cultures are not equidistant from British culture, right? And neither one of us is British. I've always tried to respect the fact that I am American. I was in the UK even longer than you, but I never considered myself a native, and and had to respect the fact that I was in someone else's country.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I grew up speaking English. British and American culture are adjacent.
Yeah.
They're very similar. They're interpermeable, right? So they feed each other, and there's a lot of travel back and forth, both metaphorically as well as literally. And so, I had things to learn when I first arrived, and I tried to learn them, but it wasn't that hard. Let's face it. It wasn't like going to some tiny village in South America in the Amazon or something.
And starting from
It
scratch.
never seen Western culture, and we couldn't communicate. I mean, it wasn't like that. It was just figuring out what Dad's army was because I didn't grow up watching it. And you also are from you're from the same continent. You have every reason to be familiar broadly with the European canon, and so it's not a huge leap. And it's more likely that you and I will assimilate. I think I did assimilate to the best of my ability, and that means participating in the mainstream culture, which I did, which I continue to do actually, which I'm doing right now. And I should also clarify that I found leaving very difficult and painful, and it was hard for me. I was deeply torn about it because I have roots in the UK, probably more than I do in the US now. Just I've spent more time there. I have more friends there. I have more colleagues. I have more professional connections. And in fact, one of the big attractions of moving to Portugal is it's such a short plane ride away from the UK. And I go back a lot. I'm
Mm-hmm.
planning to go back twice in March. Um, I'll be back in May. I So in some weird way, I haven't completely left. I have not certainly not cut my ties. It's not like marching out in disgust and I'm never going back there again. I mean, it's a big part of my life, and it will continue to be a big part of my life.
It's that sort of being torn between what to do is very much where I am right now.
Mm.
So my other half is British. He grew up in the UK. He's a bit older than me. We now have got two kids, and I am extremely concerned about sending those kids to school over here, especially with the Labour government and what they are doing, not just on destroying curriculum and turning it potentially into propaganda, which I've got a suspicion they will do.
Well, it's already well there, so
Yeah,
they
it's already
don't. Labor doesn't have to do very much.
it's already there, teaching that the young girls can become young boys and all that. But now, obviously, there is a mandatory requirement for the schools to be teaching the curriculum which is chosen by the government, and they've already said that they want to make it less traditional, more focused on diversity and equity and inclusion and all that. Everything, all the madness that comes with it. And the idea of teaching that to, or letting my kids sort of be taught that, is a bit crazy for me, or it really clashes with what I know to be right and what
Mm.
I know of my country and how the propaganda was being taught to young kids during the communism. So I find it very, very difficult to really square up, for example, my future over here and letting my kids sort of through that system. And I am very tempted to escape for at least
Mm.
several years. But we do have ties over here. We've got elderly parents-in-law that are not going to go anywhere. And we've still got assets here, for example, that we wouldn't necessarily liquidate. But I do feel
Where would you go? Back to Poland?
I think that I think it would be a bit too much for my partner. Poland is a big would be a very big move for him language
Hmm.
wise.
Mm.
He would probably struggle with the language. Polish language is extremely difficult to learn.
All those consonants.
Yes, all those consonants. And the crazy thing about Polish is once you actually know how to pronounce the 32 letters, you can read fluently in Poland. We don't have like that unpredictable pronunciation like English does. You will not understand what you're reading, but you will know how to read.
Hmm.
But as a language to master, very, very difficult. Our best friend, or my best friend, is in Spain. She's got a forest school on the side of the mountain, and I'm tempted to
Mm.
just escape to sort of for a year maybe and see how things go. Because
Mm.
we wouldn't be deleting things over here. We could always come back. But I think right now I find it a little bit uncomfortable to be sending my kids potentially to school over here. So the idea of maybe like doubling our toes in whether we would maybe live abroad, or at least press pause, because right now I just can't imagine spending the next 10 years in here, simply because that I just find it unacceptable. What's happening politically, what's happening culturally, on the societal level. Extremely, extremely worried about all of these changes. And I just wish that the British culture and British people will wake up on time.
Well, there may be hope, partly in the fact that British culture is so imitative of the United States. I mean, after all the woke stuff they didn't make up. That's one of the things that's especially undignified about the whole phenomenon in the UK is that it's it's not only dumb, but it's not even original dumb. It's imitative dumb. But the upside of that is that I do get the sense that the U.S. is turning a cultural and political corner. The election was a massive watershed, and I've been cautious about this because I don't want to jump the gun and just assume that all the ideologies that I have spent the last 10 or so years opposing are now vanquished and I can just think about something else. I I would love to, but I'm not convinced it's over, and I don't think that this stuff can be defeated quite that easily. But the tide is at least running in the right direction. And I've never been a big Trump supporter, but it does look as if the fact that he won and that he's bringing in a whole raft of different people and kicking out a lot of other people. Well, it's hugely symbolic. And sometimes cultures can change very quickly. I mean, after all, especially in terms of its acceptance in the mainstream, the the whole progressive movement, as it's called in the United States, itself took over very quickly, right? It was
Yes.
a, I don't know, in relation to the trans obsession, I would trace that back to about 2012, which is right when homosexuality was suddenly, it lost all its stigma, and gay marriage was accepted almost universally, and everyone needed a new cause to add to the LBGT whatever alphabet. So I say that started about 2012. It really got going, but the whole thing really got going in about 2014, which is where most people who've written about it would say that the the woke phenomenon, which we weren't calling it at that time, really took off. But when it took off like gangbusters. And why can't it work the same way in the other direction, right? I mean, I did a piece recently for Spiked Online that argued that whether or not this progressive movement has been summarily defeated with the election, I think we have a chance to convince these folks who are natural conformists. And you can tell because, basically they do what they're told and they use all the language they're told. So if they're conformists, and that means they're concerned with fashion, then we can convince them then that it's old hat,
Yeah.
it's out of fashion. It
I mean, I,
is and if they continue to talk about white privilege, it's totally yesterday, and they're embarrassing themselves. And and it's really on that level that I think they can be defeated.
yeah. And I
Not
think,
not using argument. I mean, you would think that you would be able to defeat it with argument, but if you could defeat it with argument, we would have done that a long time ago.
yeah,
Because
no, it doesn't.
there are no good reasons to believe these dumb things.
It doesn't
So,
listen to any
but
argumentations.
I think they do care about not being trendy, about being behind the times. I think that's the way we can really put the kibosh on the whole thing.
I think the sheer depth of the culture and how far back it goes. I find your arguments persuasive that it will bounce back quickly. But certainly, I mean, even if we got completely competent government and really really good people into the office in 2029, it will take 5 to 10 years by that point my kids would be through the system, which is rotten, essentially. So for me, it's like there is that, what do I do for the sake of my children, or what do I do because I feel guilty for even considering leaving the country that has given me so much.
Yeah, I had a similar problem. I mean, maybe it was weird because first off, I'm not so egotistical that I think that everyone cares so damn much
Oh,
of
yes, or
whether
that you can even change anything,
right,
right? Put
or
little
that it makes
me.
any big difference.
Yeah.
So I should feel free to live wherever I want, and if I want to live in a new place, then what's my problem? But I still felt guilty. I felt traitorous.
Yes,
You know, I felt as
absolutely.
if I was abandoning,
The ship.
yes, like a abandoning a friend in a time of woe. So 'cause the very reasons that I wanted to leave were also reasons to stay because uh, the future looked dark and maybe I could help or it just seemed like a down vote,
Yeah,
right? It was a down vote for the UK, and it was, and that made me feel bad because
yeah.
you know I had many good years there, and I still have many good friends there,
Yeah.
and
So I think for
and
us,
I haven't quite got over that. I still feel a little disloyal.
yeah, I think for us, if we were moving, it would be very much like you. We would still leave the business that we've got over here. We would still leave the ties. We probably wouldn't sell all the assets that we've got. But I think we would just, for now, just dip our toes. Probably northern Spain or Portugal. We've got links in both.